Welcome to the Mainly Moonology podcast. I'm your host, Yasmin Boland, an award-winning astrologer and the Sunday Times best-selling author of books including Moonology and creator of the Moonology Oracle cards. My intention for this podcast is to help you understand how you can create your dream life using mainly Moonology, the moon, as your guide. Hey everybody, it's Yasmin Boland here. How are you? I have a slightly gravelly voice right now, or a bit of a low voice. My son thinks I sound like my sister, Claudia. So hi Claudia, if you listen to this, I love you. All right, so let's look at the astrology for the week ahead, and then I'm going to introduce you to an amazing guest for the week. But I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about the astrology as well, because I know you guys love that. So I guess the first thing to say is, as the week begins, we are in the new moon cycle. We've just had the new moon. I hope you came and did the little mini new moon session I did on Facebook. If you don't follow me on Facebook, you can easily find me there, Yasmin Boland, Moonology will get you there. It's the Yasmin Boland page is the one I really use. And I did a new moon ceremony. And in case you weren't there, I did draw a card for everybody who watched the ceremony, but I'm going to make this card for everybody who listens to this podcast as well. So the new moon was very exciting and sort of change-making energy. So, unless you're really digging your heels in, things can start to change for you now. But the card I got it's actually kind of, on the one hand, it was almost counterintuitive, and on the other hand, it was actually perfect. We got the Take a Breath card. This is from my new Moonology Messages deck, which comes out tomorrow if you haven't ordered it yet. I'll give you a link to that, moonmessages.com/messages. And I'm doing a launch party as well, moonmessages/party 2023. We'll put those links down at the bottom. On the one hand, it was kind of counterintuitive because the energy of the new moon is very, very electric. So it's like, oh, that doesn't seem very electric, take a breath. But then when I read the interpretations booklet, it made complete sense, because what it's saying is things are really electric right now. Take a breath. So, slow down, meanings for the card. Being manic won't help. Breathe, drop the drama. Give the situation time to unfold. So, whatever you're going through right now, think of that as an answer to what should I do next. And by the way, if you do order my Oracle cards before Tuesday this week, you will get a free workshop as well, which is about, can you use Oracle cards to change your life? And in a way, that's kind of what I've just shown you here is, this card can be used. It's like, okay, the energies are really electric, but I'm going to just take a breath. So if you want to grab the cards, moonmessages.com/messages. Anyway, all about this week's energy. So as I said, we're in the new moon cycle. So that's the waxing cycle. So that's the go for it time. And this week we do have some very interesting energies. And so on September 19, which is Tuesday, which is the day my new cards come out. So I've already looked at the energies for this, because whenever I get sent a publication date by Hay House, I always look at the date and see what it is. And, unless it's really terrible, I always assume it's the energy that the product needs. But, I also just have a look to see what it is. And so we've got Sun opposite Neptune for the publication day this time around, which is amazing, because the Sun is all about the focus. So we can all expect our focus to be on Neptunian things. And guess what Neptune includes? Mysticism, the numinous, intuition, which is what my new Moonology Messages cards are all about. Meditation, chanting, the divine, sacred connection, so it's just a really, really nice energy for me, for the cards, and also really nice energy for everybody who would like to get in touch with their higher self, their spiritual side, the part of them that knows they're connected to all life everywhere, the part that knows we're creating our own reality, and the part that knows that, we dream dreams and dreams can become real. Now, if you know astrology, you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute. Yeah, okay, but what about the other side of Neptune? And don't worry, I'm getting to that. So what about the other side of Neptune, I hear you ask? Yeah, so there is this other side, and talking about how oracle cards can help you create your life, so can astrology. Because if you take a moment this week, especially before Tuesday, to think, where am I kidding myself? Where have I got my head in the sand? Where have I got my head in the clouds? Where am I just lying to myself? Who's not telling me the truth? What am I confused about? Have a think. Are you involved with people who are not being honest with you? Are you involved with people who are sort of giving you half truths, or maybe lying by omission, and all those difficult things? Neptune can be about deception and disappointment. So, you might say, okay, well, hang on a minute. I want the meditation and the chanting and the connection to the divine. I don't want all this deception and, confusion. And there is a way you can kind of choose that, because we all choose our lives all the time, every day. And, for example, if you're involved with someone who's throwing up a lot of red flags, and you're like, nah, this doesn't feel right. I've got a really bad feeling about this, or I don't think this person's telling me the truth, or I think this person's being deceptive, then you might get the deceptive side of Neptune. Whereas it's the intuitive side of Neptune that's telling you what you need to know. So it's not like all good or all bad. It's really a question of how are you living your life? How are you living your life? And that's a really good question to ask yourself. And then the next thing that the sun does after opposing Neptune is on the 21st, which is Thursday. It's going to trine Pluto, which is, gorgeous, because that's really positive and constructive. And, it's got a real feeling with Pluto when the sun trines Pluto. For me, it's always a bit like whatever's been torn down can start to be rebuilt. And I'll just mention again, we are still in the post-shadow periods for Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde. So, if you've worked out what you really value, if you've reevaluated your life and thought, hang on a minute, I've made a few mistakes here. I don't think I'm giving enough time to what really matters most to me, or I'm not prioritizing what matters most to me, then it's not too late to make those changes. You may feel them intuitively this week, and then by Thursday, there's really good energy for making changes, for making, acting on that information that you've gathered. Then on September the 23rd, which let me just check that. So that's next Saturday, we have the sun moving into Libra. So I'll talk about that more next week, but it's very much about relationships and the focus on relationships. And then, of course, we're going to get the new moon in Libra quite soon. I think it even might be an eclipse. And then we're going to have Venus trining Chiron also on the weekend, which is very healing for any relationships which have been fractured or not feeling as good as they could. So there you have the astrology for the week ahead. As I said, my Moonology Messages cards are coming out this week. I would love you to grab a copy. Especially, I'd love you to grab a copy before they come out, because that's really good for the Amazon algorithm, and you will get some really great pre-order bonuses, including that workshop I mentioned, the Can You Use Oracle Cards to Change Your Life workshop. And the address again for that is moonmessages.com/messages. Also, as a part of signing up for the cards, but even if you haven't, you will be invited to my Moonology Messages launch party on Facebook, which is also on September the 19th, so that's Tuesday. And to get your invitation to that, it is moonmessages.com/party 2023. So now I'm going to turn over to an interview I did earlier, a couple of weeks ago, I would say, with the wonderful Brigit from Biddy Tarot. And as a part of the celebration for my Moonology Messages cards coming out, I've been interviewing some amazing people. If you haven't heard the interviews, check back. They include amazing people such as Radley Valentine and Colette Barron Reed. Plus, I've got one today now for you with Brigit from Biddy Tarot, one of the most well-loved tarot sites on the internet. And I've also got one coming up with the wonderful Chris Ann, who's a fellow Hay House author who wrote the Light Seers Tarot. So here is the chat that Brigit and I had. I will just throw over to it. I won't give you all the details about it. I'll just say, guess what? It's interesting, and she's amazing. I hope you enjoyed. If you love oracle cards and tarot cards, I think you're going to get a fair bit out of it, especially if sometimes they've made you a little bit nervous. All right, here we go.
So welcome to this week's Mainly Moonology podcast. Now, I call it Mainly Moonology because sometimes we actually do things which aren't particularly about moonology, although in this case it can be a kind of a hybrid. This week we're talking to one of the foremost tarot readers in the whole wide world, at least in my humble opinion. I don't know, Brigit, if there are more people out there who have a better reach than you do, but honestly, every time I turn around or anyone mentions tarot, it's always about Biddy Tarot. So I'd just like to welcome you to the show, Brigit. But before we speak, let me just introduce you to people. So Brigit runs a website called Biddy Tarot, BIDDY tarot.com, which I've known about for years and years. And she works with tarot. She says, I'm here to help you trust your intuition, access your inner power, and bring the divine into your everyday life using tarot as a guide. Brigit has been reading tarot for more than 20 years and has helped millions of people around the world create personal and intuitive connections with tarot cards through her courses, books, and her online community. She says, I'm on a mission to bring tarot into the mainstream as a modern, intuitive tool for purpose-driven people who are ready to live life at their fullest potential. Now, Brigit, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And yeah, I can't believe it's been so many years since we've actually been able to connect.
Yes. So how long have you been online? Because I feel like you've been around for ages. And in fact, when I saw your photo, I was quite surprised. I was expecting to see someone who was about 80.
That's very kind. I actually went online in 1999. Can you believe it?
When the internet, I knew it was a long time. Yeah.
Yes.
And yes. Okay. And I need to ask you, what is your star sign out of interest?
Well, I am a Taurus, so I've just had my birthday last week.
Right. Well, happy birthday for last week. Okay, so let's just cut to the chase here because we're going to talk about tarot, but I also want people to understand that in terms of using it with moonology, let's just say right off the bat, a bit of moonology here is, a tarot reading at new moon and full moon. So if you're thinking, hang on a minute, I came here to listen to about the moon, well, just keep that in your mind as we talk. So, Brigit, tell me a little bit about you and kind of what you were doing before 1999, because this is obviously now a big business and your full-time job. But what were you doing before that?
Yeah, so I started Biddy Tarot as just a side hobby while I was studying at university. I was studying a commerce degree and I later did a master's in HR, and I had a really wonderful and fulfilling career in the corporate world for about 15 years. And so I was working in corporate, and then I also had Biddy Tarot on the side, and it was just, fun, creative outlet. And then around 2009, or maybe a little bit before, I read The 4-Hour Work Week. I don't know if you've read that one by Tim Ferriss.
I haven't. Should I?
Well, maybe. But that was certainly a catalyst for me to go, okay, I could actually take things that I'm really interested in and turn that into an online business and do it in a way that I can create a happy, balanced lifestyle as well. So from that point, I started building Biddy Tarot out with tarot card meetings and ebook. I was doing tarot readings and so on. And then finally I got to a point where I could leave my corporate job in 2012 because that income it was about the same that I was getting through my business and through corporate. So I thought, all right, I can leave corporate now. And yeah, really since that point, what are we 10, 11 years from there? What we've grown into is I have a team of 15 team members who are all virtual around the world. We serve millions of people online. Anytime you look up a tarot card, you'll find Biddy Tarot. And we have over 10,000 students, 1,000 certified Biddy Tarot advisors. And I'm just absolutely honored and overjoyed to be teaching tarot in this more modern, more approachable, and more empowering way.
Right. And for those of you who are wondering, Brigit is Australian. We're both Australian, and Brigit lives on the Sunshine Coast in Australia, I asked. Again, just a quick question, but why Biddy? Is that what people call you for short?
Well, there's a little story with this if you have a couple of minutes.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
I always say, I wish it was this fantastic story of where I went out into the bush of Australia and I meditated and a kangaroo came up and delivered me this name, but it wasn't like that. It was more when I was in my teenage years, a lot of my friends had nicknames, but I didn't have a nickname. And I thought, oh, what could I call myself? I know, I'll call myself Biddy. So I kept telling everyone, call me Biddy. It's short for Brigit. But no one would pick it up. And I was just, because I realized that actually you've got to be given your nickname. You can't really tell people you wanted to be called something. So when I was then growing Biddy Tarot and my tarot website while I was working in corporate, I wanted to keep those two identities quite separate. So that was really my pseudonym online was Biddy. And yeah, it really just took off from there.
So I ask all my podcast guests to tell me a couple of things that they would like me to ask them, because I often think that's how you get the best questions. And you gave me a question that I just don't even know how you're going to answer it, because it's such a hard question. But are you ready for your own hard question that you wrote for yourself?
You've got me worried.
Okay, the question is, how does tarot work? I thought that nobody knows the answer to this question.
Well, I mean, we could definitely play it that way, that it's always going to be shrouded in mystery and one will never really know how it all works. But the way that I see it is with tarot, it's almost like these 78 pages of a book. And so each page has this picture and the picture tells this story. The story has a deeper meaning. And when you put all these 78 tarot cards together, it's just amazing at how it's almost like a 360-degree view of one's life, the different phases, the different lessons we learn, the experiences that we have, the different personalities that we kind of tap into, and so on. So the way I see tarot working is we're actually using the visual elements of the cards to be able to tap into our unconscious or subconscious and our intuitive mind. So when we're typically working through every day, we're usually working out of our conscious mind. But when we want to tap into that subconscious, it's things like symbolism, images, stories that really help us to then bypass the conscious and then enter more of that subconscious and more intuitive space. So I used to think that you had to be psychic or intuitive to be able to read tarot well. But what I've realized over time is that actually tarot is the thing that helps you become more intuitive, because it's training your brain, it's training your mind through the visual images and the symbolism to be able to connect with your intuition much quicker and much more easily. So that's really how I see it working. It's that connection with the imagery gives you that access to your innermost mind. And then, of course, there's also that factor of like, well, how on earth did tarot tell me that this person seeing this younger man, they're having a hot, love affair and so on? Like, how's that work? And I see it similarly, but instead of tapping into your own individual unconscious or subconscious mind, it also helps you connect in with the collective conscious and the collective unconscious. And that really is where you can then start to tap into, well, what might be happening, for you or for the person that you're reading for. And it's somehow that sort of information begins to flow because it's all accessible once we bypass that kind of thinking mind that we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I would like to ask you, do you think that tarot cards, therefore, are a manifestation of what's in your mind at the moment, like what you are currently manifesting, or are they a prediction that you sort of is outside of yourself? Which do you think it is?
Yeah, I really do see it like a mirror to the soul. So it's for me, it's a lot more about a reflection of where you are currently. And when it comes to things like predicting the future, I know a lot of people think, oh, tarot, yeah, fortune telling and get your crystal ball out. And, some people are into that and that's fine. From my view, I would much rather focus on what's happening now and in the present, because I know that that's where I can make the change. If I'm looking out into the future, I'm going, oh, well, this thing's going to happen regardless of what actions I take. Well, that's completely disempowering. I'd much rather come back into the present moment and go, okay, this is what I want to create. This is what I want to manifest. And how do I do that based on what I have currently?
Right.
So I see it, very much as a now tool rather than a future tool.
Yeah. I remember back in the day getting some pretty intense cards which were accurate. one in particular, I mean, I almost don't want to go into them, but because it's so private, and one was actually not for me. But I feel like they kind of do read what's happening right now. Do you think, I mean, you've got years of experience. Do you think you can change what's happening right now then once you know, because you've read the cards? Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I think we always have choices. Like we've been given free will. And while I think that there is destiny, that there is kind of a direction that we are tended to head towards, we can still make those decisions day to day about whether, are we going to take the curly route to get to that destiny? Are we going to take a more direct route? Is it going to be hard? Is it going to be easy? And so on. So, when you're really connected in with your intuition, yes, you can start to sense like, okay, I think I'm gravitating towards this outcome. And my sense is that is something that's happening, right? But I can now make choices about, do I want to make that easier for me? Do I want to quit my job so that I can now follow my soul's path and my soul's mission? Or do I want to hang on to that job because I still want the income and I'm still a little bit scared, but I really know that I'm being pulled towards that? Does that kind of make sense? Like, I think you can still choose what path you want to take, but there's always kind of a gravitational pull to something that you're destined to head towards.
Yeah, I used to do a lot more tarot than I do now. And I'll tell you just really bare bones of the story that made me start to get a little bit scared of them was I did a reading. I actually stopped reading for myself one point because I just thought they're too scary. And then I still did readings for other people, mainly because I love tarot cards and I wanted to kind of keep using them. I usually use the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And I did a reading for someone who'd sort of been trying to get pregnant and just wasn't having any luck, she and her partner. And I did a reading for her and I can't remember what she got, but it was a really not very nice swords card.
Probably 3 of swords or 10 of swords.
I think it was the 10 of swords, actually, not the 3 of swords. The 3 of swords was in another one of my scary tarot stories. Just basically, I think it was the one where she's sitting in bed, surrounded by swords.
The 9.
Yeah, the 9, yeah, exactly. And I remember saying to her, however it works out, try not to make this the defining thing of your life, because I was thinking this is not going to work out. Anyway, lo and behold, she just had IVF and 2 weeks later she was pregnant. And I was like, oh, gosh, that's not what I expected. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, because the cards never seem to say anything but the truth. But here we are, and she's made it. She's pregnant after, 5 rounds of IVF or whatever. Lo and behold, she lost the baby. And it just freaked me out so much. And for me, that was a prediction rather than, maybe it was what she was manifesting. I don't know. Maybe her fear around not being able to be a mum was what she was manifesting. I don't know. But how do you see something like that? I'm kind of asking for therapy now, because that was like 10 years ago and it still haunts me.
And I think, sometimes people think, if I am consulting the cards and they come up with these types of cards, am I making something bad happen? Like, have I affected this outcome that's seemingly negative? And I think that can sometimes be quite hard to grapple with. But in essence, no, like the cards, they're still pieces of cardboard with ink on them. And it's more that we're just tapping into more of this matrix and understanding. Like, we're almost like dancing between that past, present, and future, and tapping into that collective unconscious that is available to all of us. And I think you probably were seeing something that was probably already in progress, right? So it almost is inevitable that that's the outcome. What's challenging is seeing that card at a point at which should be a very happy moment for your client. And then having that feeling that maybe this won't last.
It was very difficult, and it sort of put me off, and I basically didn't do any tarot readings for about 5 years after that. So, what do you do if you're reading for yourself and the Tower comes up? Isn't that a scary card? Doesn't it send a chill down your back?
Yeah, there's a few cards that I don't enjoy pulling, and especially the worst is when I'm doing a group and then I'm trying to tap into a very inspiring message for the group, And out comes like the Five of Pentacles, which is about, scarcity and not having, or the Tower, like, chaos and destruction. But here's the thing, there actually are no good cards and bad cards of tarot. And just as in life, like, there are events that happen that can feel very jarring and that don't feel great at the time that they're happening. But oftentimes those are like portals into something that is even better and more aligned for us. So even if you were to see, like, if you were to ask about a relationship and then you see the Tower and you think, oh gosh, well, that relationship's not going to last. I really like to be able to trust that, okay, there's something in, like, there's an important message in this. And even though it might not seem desirable right now, I'm trusting that this is for the right reason. And if I'm reading for a client, I might think that, oh, this is terrible news for them. Sometimes people want to like sugarcoat it or not tell them the whole thing. But that could actually be really good news for someone. Like, oh, thank God it's over. I've been waiting for this, right? We can't assume what's good and what's bad.
Yeah. So in a way, I feel like getting those tough cards can be the price you pay for meddling with, trying to figure out what's going on. And you have to be willing to take it on the chin. If you're going to ask the question, you have to be prepared for the answer. Do you feel like that's the case?
Well, it's like just life in general. I don't think it's even isolated to tarot. You can choose to go through life with like blinkers on and only see what you want to see. Or you can choose to go through life with eyes wide open and be really open to receive the highs and the lows, the sideways, the going forwards and so on. And, that's that's a population, right? You can choose to go and just live kind of a very traditional life, or you can live in a more open way. And I think, I think that's always a choice, but I think it's more about having that growth mindset and being open to receive and understanding that things are happening for you, for the longer, like the highest good and for the longer term benefit of yourself and others. Again, even if it seems terrible in the moment.
Yes. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So do you ever do, because I know a lot of people do, and I used to as well. Do you ever do full moon and new moon readings?
Yes, I do very much enjoy the full moon and new moon readings.
And how do you do them? Which spreads do you use? Do you use a variety of spreads, or do you always use the Celtic Cross, or what is your go-to?
Well, actually, I created a more of a general new moon and a full moon tarot spread. And then we also publish the spreads that align with the astrology for like the full moon and the new moon as well.
Right.
So I find that can be really potent as well for just tapping into that energy.
Amazing. And can people find that on your website, or is that for just members, or how does that work?
Yeah, actually the best place is just on our Instagram. So our handle is @BiddyTarot. And then each new moon and full moon, we're posting the astrological spread for that particular moon phase.
Right.
And our community love it. And so I'm sure like your community too are really connected into the lunar phases. It's a great way of integrating tarot and the lunar cycles.
Right. Amazing. I actually don't follow you on Instagram. I will do that. So we'll all follow you on Instagram, that's for sure. Okay, more questions for you. What do you think about one card readings?
I think they can be very powerful. It's interesting because people think, oh, I've got to do that 10-card Celtic Cross, right? That seems to be in every single book. And you think, well, the more cards, the more like deep my reading is going to be. But I think there's such a beautiful invitation when we just work with one card. Because I've done readings before with just one card that have been over an hour long. Because what we do is we dive into that card and we really dance with the card and we absorb all of the messages within that card. And I think it can be incredibly powerful. But you don't have to do hour-long readings either. Another thing that I really enjoy is just the daily one card reading. So at the start of your day, just having that 5-10 minutes out to tune in and pull a card and check into the energy for the day that you might want to express or what you need to help manifest your goals. And it's a really beautiful way of just connecting in, grounding down, and then, leading with intention for that day.
Right, yes, and hopefully you don't get the Tower or the Three of Swords or something.
Yes, yes.
Are a lot of people as nervous as I am around oracle cards? I was fine when I was single, but as soon as I got married and had my son, I was like, I don't want to do the scary cards anymore. Are a lot of people like that, do you find, or am I just a complete wuss?
No, you're not a wuss. It is something that people can have like a fear about. And I think often that is that fear that the cards have power themselves and that they make things happen. And that, if you do consult it, you've just then kind of locked in your future.
Or you give yourself a negative self-fulfilling prophecy, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah. And then you're living towards that and you think, am I kind of off track or on track? But I think that's where, like, if you can work with the tarot with an open mind and a willingness to be in a receiving mode, and a willingness to connect in with your intuition and to be trusting your intuition without kind of fear or blocking yourself or, worry and so on. I think it's more when we have that open mind that it can actually be a real gift. Particularly, I actually love it now when I encounter these kind of so-called negative cards, because what it's doing is it's taking that thing that probably was settled in my subconscious mind somewhere, affecting me, but I wasn't aware of it. But now I am aware of it. I can bring it into my conscious mind and I can go, oh, there it is. That's why I'm, feeling anxious today. It's because I'm feeling trapped, or I don't have my sense of freedom today. Fantastic. Well, now I know that. I can do something about it. But if it's locked down there in my subconscious mind, I'm not going to be aware of it, but it's going to continue to affect me,
Yeah. And Brigit, do you think of yourself as a witch? Because tarot seems very witchy to me. But you don't look like a witch at all. You're all beautiful and gorgeous and, blonde, and you look like, an angel. But witches can be angels, obviously. That's a stupid thing for me to say, really. But you don't have a dark energy whatsoever, and you think of witches as like these deep, magical women who can call in the elements and all this. And you look more like someone who's going to wave their magic wand and grant 3 wishes, if I may say. Shouldn't probably make personal comments, but you know what I'm trying to say. I'm kind of digging a hole here. But do you think of yourself as a witch, or do you just like tarot?
Well, I think witches come in many forms, and I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts, because I think a lot of this is affected or is affected by like what's in the media. And whenever we see TV shows, it's typically dark and there's like a steaming cauldron and people, saying spells and so on. But up here on the Sunshine Coast, I have a beautiful community of hippie friends, of earthy friends, regular friends, and we all have our different ways of connecting in with the land, with the elements. We have our own spiritual practices. And to me, that is also what embodies like a true kind of witch and the witchy ways. Because I think, it can extend way beyond what we understand as like a traditional witch, which is unfortunately has been portrayed in such a negative light.
Yeah, and I just did it again, and I feel bad about that. And I almost would say I should just cut this bit of the interview out, but I won't, because, it's being authentic about how I feel about tarot, really. That scariness that I have, which honestly I'm only kind of really realizing how deep it runs talking to you, and also that idea of a witch doesn't have to be dark. So I don't even know where that sort of came from. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's like, it's just, I suppose, generations of conditioning. And even if I think I am a witch, probably, I think I'm a witch, but obviously I do have some kind of weird, negative, not negative, but it has to be dark, and it doesn't have to be dark. It can, I'm sure nature witches are anything but dark. They're out there, in nature.
Yes, but I'm glad you voiced it, because that is like a lot of people have that experience, and a lot of people have the fear and thinking, oh gosh, what would it be like to be surrounded by witches and all these things. come up. It's actually a very wonderful experience, and I think we've got to work on adjusting and realigning what it really means to be a witch, because it really was actually just a connection into the earth and a connection to nature, which is really our truest essence. It's our truest selves. Like when we finally get back to who we really are, we find that we actually really enjoy being in nature and having that connection to earth, fire, water, air, and so on.
Yeah. And in fact, what I'm really feeling intuitively is, honestly, now I've really identified these fears I have around tarot, which I hadn't really even thought about. I need to face my fears. So I think I'm going to, maybe I can see my deck, my Rider-Waite-Smith deck on my bookshelf right now, like untouched for, months at least, if not years. I might dip into them once a year. So have you ever thought of doing your own deck?
Well, actually, we've just recently launched our own deck, which is super exciting. And I'm pretty straightforward with my title. So our deck is called the Biddy Tarot deck.
Okay. I'm very straightforward too. My team are always telling me, husband, you're so literal.
Yes. But we created it as like a really modern interpretation of the Rider-Waite deck. I really grew up with that Rider-Waite-Smith, and I think it's an amazing deck. So we just really wanted to honor that timeless wisdom that's, been in there for like hundreds of years, and then add our own kind of magic to it. We've got more skin diversity. We've got beautiful color palette. It's really good on social media.
Right. I need to have a look at it. It's on your website, is it? Is it in the shop?
Yes. Yeah. And all over our Instagram, we're using the Biddy Tarot deck now.
Right. Well. I need to follow you on social media. That's on Instagram. Probably my fear of tarot, slowed me down. Oh, I see. Yeah, it's beautiful. You've done a kind of a very stylized version. And you can do that, can you? Because the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is in the public domain.
Yes. Yeah, we have sought the legal advice on that one. Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, that's beautiful. So now I need to ask you, what do you think of oracle cards? Do you like all cards, or are oracle cards a bit, wet and namby-pamby for you, or what is it?
Well, it's funny because what I love, like the grit of tarot, like it just shows everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then I really do enjoy oracle cards for like their kind of more like soulful, inspiring type message. And I quite like using the two together. So an oracle card is a really nice way to like open a tarot reading. And then also it's a nice way to close a tarot reading, particularly if maybe the message has been a little bit more difficult to hear. Or not, as expected, but just ending it with an oracle card to say, it's all going to be okay. Like this is one area to focus on. This is kind of your motivation and inspiration forward. That tends to work really well. And, I often actually go to the oracle cards just for my own spiritual practice, as more, I guess, like signposts or little just times to realign with my energy. I really do quite like oracle, but I definitely think they're two very different things. Oftentimes people think they're the same, but I think that these are very different.
Right. Okay. Amazing. Okay. Now, I would like to let people know about something that you offer on your website, because I think it's a really nice way for people to start to connect with you. And we talked about doing your tarot card meanings cheat sheet for people. Okay, so this is something, let people know what it is so they know what they're going to get, and they'll be motivated to go to the link. I've actually created you a short link so we can say it easily here on the podcast, but we'll put the full link in the description for people who are listening where they can actually see the description, because I think if you listen to a podcast online, it's quite hard to see the show notes. So I've created moonmessages.com/Biddy, BIDDY. But yeah, tell people about this tarot card cheat sheet and what they're going to get from it.
Yeah, so what we've created is a keyword reference chart, printable type resource. And so for every tarot card, for every one of the 78 cards, you'll receive a couple of keywords for the upright version and then the reversed version of that card. And the reason that this is like so popular, like with our community and people coming into our community, is because it's probably one of the easiest ways just to get started with tarot. So even if you get a deck, maybe start looking through the booklet, trying to work out what the cards mean, and you don't always remember it. Just having this printable like next to you when you're just doing your one card pull might be like, oh, the Fool, new beginnings. And then you go, oh yes, now I remember. Yeah, new beginnings. And it inspires, like kind of kickstarts your intuition to start working. So it's a really nice complement or partner to the way that you're just starting to get to know the tarot cards.
Yeah, right. Okay. So guys, if you dare dip into the tarot, I'm going to dip back into the tarot after this conversation. In fact, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go downstairs to the kitchen and I'm going to do a tarot spread on my most pressing question and just hold my breath. Maybe I'll just do, what is happening in the next 3 days so I don't feel I'm dooming myself if I get those scary cards. But if you want to get the cheat sheet, I've actually just signed up for it. It's moonmessages.com/biddy, BIDDY. So tell us where else people can find you, Brigit. Obviously, there's biddytarot.com, and now we've talked about Instagram. Are you on Facebook, YouTube, anything like that?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, same handle. YouTube, we're just reviving again. So I'm making some really great new videos all about tarot. So again, the handle there is @biddytarot. And we've just relaunched our podcast again, which is that's been in hiatus for about 4 years. So it's great to have that back on again. And it's again, I'm very literal. So that's called the Biddy Tarot Podcast.
Right. Yes. Well, mine's, mainly Moonology, because I do mainly Moonology. That was actually quite poetic for me. Normally it would be something like, the Moonology Podcast. Anyway, Brigit, I feel like I've actually had a bit of therapy today. So thank you very much. I feel like I'm sort of facing up to my fears about tarot, which is very interesting for me because I didn't even really realize how deep my fears around tarot ran. And it's also probably, and maybe something other people have, is maybe connected to, growing up Catholic, because, it's almost like, with oracle cards, they can tell you that the SHIT is about to hit the fan, but without that punch in the face. But tarot cards are so direct. And I think there's, a mixture of all that swirling around. But at the end of the day, if we don't face our fears, we just stay stuck in our fears, don't we? So
we just published a new video on YouTube, which is Tarot Evil? And I don't know, Yasmin, this might be part of your therapy, but I would recommend just watching that. Just stick out
I promise I will watch it. I promise I'll watch it. Amazing. Okay. And I have one final question for you because it's sort of unanswered. And it made me wonder. You mentioned a couple of times about how when you read the cards, you sort of riff intuitively off the images in the cards. So when you do, say, the Rider-Waite-Smith versus the Marseille deck, do the cards basically have the same meaning, or because the images are quite different, they might have quite different meanings, or do you just use the one deck?
Yeah, so this is kind of where like tarot and oracle are very different, because in oracle, like every deck is its own thing. It has its own messages and so on. Whereas tarot, you've got generally a very set structure of the 78 cards.
Yeah.
And no matter what deck, each card, like the Ace of Swords, is always going to have a very similar meaning across decks, but it's been expressed in a different way by the artist. And so that can create a really beautiful opportunity to go, okay, well, I know the Ace of Swords is about new thoughts or a breakthrough, but then I'm also going to look at the imagery and see what comes through to me through this particular deck that's important to me at this particular time. Some people even like to do, say, you can do a side-by-side reading. So let's say if you just did a 3-card reading, you could use the 2 decks. So use one of the deck to pull the cards, and then you go through the second deck and you pull out those same cards and you do a side by side, just to kind of add a new layer to that reading, which is really interesting.
Right. And actually, sorry, I do have 2 more questions. One is, I remember Doreen Virtue back in the day saying that she took all the scary cards out of her tarot deck. What do you think about that?
Well, each to their own. Doreen doesn't read tarot anymore. So
no, she doesn't.
Plenty. But yeah, no, that would not be something I would do. But again, I always respect that each person has their own style as well.
Yes. It may have been a sort of a, like a warning flashlight of what was coming up for Doreen anyway, that she didn't want to have.
Maybe.
And lastly, I'm actually looking at multiple oracle card style tarot decks on my bookshelves that people have done, like Radley Valentine and Colette Baron-Reid and Doreen Virtue, who famously did a guardian angel tarot deck, which was sort of like completely not scary whatsoever. What do you think about those? Do you think it's great? Like, okay, a bit like you're saying, if you're using this deck or that deck or the other deck, sort of keep the meaning in mind. But if you've chosen to use this deck and it's all about, angels and light, what do you think about those tarot decks that slightly wash out the scarier bits?
Yeah, I think I appreciate that there's always a choice, right? So I have about 30 decks that sit in front of me. And so when I do a reading, I'm thinking about which deck is going to most support me for this reading. And I've got some decks that are very strong in their messaging, like very direct, others that are a little bit lighter, some are a bit more kind of soulful and so on. So I always appreciate that we all have that ability to choose what deck is going to be right for us in our readings. And, if you are leaning towards only decks that are like only the good things, maybe that's a good opportunity to check in and go, okay, what am I trying to not look at, and why is that? And what would happen if I open myself up to the light and the shade?
Yeah. Okay. And this is honestly the last question. How often do you read for yourself?
Well, I probably read every couple of days, to be honest. And I probably pull the most cards around like work situations and that sort of thing. But yeah, I really do enjoy reading the cards. I've also found that because I've worked with tarot pretty much daily for 25 years, I'm now at a point where I almost don't need the cards. I can really tune into my intuition without needing that kind of visual aid. But I do enjoy just having the cards there every now and then. It just kind of pushes my edges a little bit more as well.
And just a clarifying question. So when you do this reading every day or every couple of days, what are you doing? Are you doing a Celtic cross, a 3-card draw, or a 1-card draw? What's your go-to?
I'm a bit more on the go. So I'm usually pulling 1 card, and it might be like, if I'm about to go into a meeting, I might pull a card and go, okay, what do I need to anticipate here? Or if I'm feeling a little bit like anxious or grumbly about something, I might just pull a card and go, okay, what is it like? Why am I feeling this way? So I tend to not do the big spreads unless it's maybe on a birthday or a new moon or those sorts of things. But otherwise, yeah, a bit more just on the go.
Amazing. Well, I feel I've not only had therapy, but I've picked one of the best brains in tarot out there. So thank you so much, Brigit. We're so grateful. Just again, for people who want to get this free cheat sheet to all the meanings of tarot, if you're just starting to dip your toes into the water, I've created a short link, moonmessages.com/biddy, BIDDY, or there's the proper full length link, I think, in the show notes. I've even got more questions that I could ask you, Brigit, but I'll just save them for another day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. It was lovely to talk to you.
It has been a delight, and I can't wait to hear how your tarot readings go from now on. I'm sure it's very different.
I will email you. All right. Well, thanks again, Brigit.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Mainly Moonology podcast. If you'd like to stay updated with the moon and moonology and astrology and all the other things we cover, be sure to subscribe to the podcast via Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You'll be notified whenever a new episode is up. Also, it would mean a lot to me and my team if you could leave us a glowing 5-star review
on your podcast platform of choice, please. That actually helps more people find us too, which spreads the love and surely also brings you amazing karma for taking a moment to help us out and to help other people find the podcast. Have a great week, and I hope to speak to you next week. Lots of love.